Last year, I bought this clapped out old 2005 Kawasaki KLX110 pit bike from my buddy for $600. When he offered it to me, I really didn't know what I was going to do with it, but you do not pass up a $600 110. Fast forward 6 months, the 110 had been sitting in my shed, the CR250 build was complete, and Ron from Indiana won that bike, so it was time to decide on the next build. Well, I'd had quite a few requests to build a pit bike, so I decided that we would transform this sad old pitter into the ultimate pit bike. This video ties together the entire build process from start to finish, and there is 1 week left to enter for your chance to win this bike. That's right, you can enter through July 30th, and the winner will be selected on live stream on my YouTube channel July 31st. Links to get entered are down in the description below. As with any proper dirt bike build, step 1 is to tear the bike down into all of its individual components. I have never built or even worked on a pit bike before this, so I was really looking forward to this project because it was a change of pace from all of the 2-stroke builds, and I knew I'd be learning new things throughout the process. With the full-size bike builds, I've done enough of them by now that I have a good idea of what components I want to upgrade, what aftermarket parts I should use, etc. But with this KLX, I was starting from ground zero in terms of knowledge. I did a lot of research to determine what upgrades were worthwhile and what parts would provide the best performance. The goal in this build was to transform this bike into a ripper of a pit bike that could take a beating from a full-sized adult and hit jumps with plenty of power to do so and adequate suspension to take those impacts. Teardown is pretty much the easiest part of a build, but some level of organization is necessary. Now with big bikes, a lot of components get rebuilt or improved in some way, but with the pit bike, I knew a ton of components would simply be replaced with upgrades. These bikes are built for kids, so a lot of the parts are not necessarily designed to take the beating that adults put them through. So as I wrapped up my teardown, I was also wrapping up my parts research, and it became pretty clear who the leader in aftermarket pit bike parts is, and that is BBR Motorsports. With the bike fully stripped to the frame, a giant box of parts arrived from BBR, ready to help transform this fragile 110 into a robust, big-bore KLX 143. With the bike torn down into individual components, each of those components now needed to be stripped down even further, and I chose to begin with the engine. Upon power washing this surprisingly heavy motor, I saw that the engine mounts were ripped clean out of the crankcase halves, so new case halves were in order. I ordered all of my OEM parts as well as tons of aftermarket parts and tools from Rocky Mountain ATVMC. In fact, I have a page on the Rocky Mountain website showcasing all of my personal favorite tools, parts, and gear that they offer. If you use my link, which is linked in the description below, whether you purchase an item from my page or anywhere else on the Rocky Mountain website, I earn a commission on your purchase, so that is a great way to support my YouTube channel if you enjoy seeing videos like this.
Look at that little piston. It's so cute. Everybody wants kung fu fighting. Everybody wants fast as lightning. There she goes. She's just a little tight, man. A little tightness never hurt nobody. Would you check this out? I need to pull this crank out. I didn't want to beat on it with a hammer, so I made myself a little jig, and I'm going to use my crank puller tool, which is meant to pull the crank into the crankcase, but we're actually going to pull it out. Should work. Voila!
With the entire bottom end of the engine disassembled, I needed to remove the valves and camshaft from the cylinder head. Not only did this head and the rest of the engine components need to be fully stripped for Cerakote, but this head would be receiving a high-performance camshaft from BBR as one of many engine upgrades. I used my Tusk valve spring compressor from Rocky Mountain to get those valves removed with no issues, and it was time to begin working on the suspension. I needed to get everything disassembled as I'd be sending a batch of parts out to Miles at Canaan Lasers for Cerakoting. Oftentimes during bike builds, I may start reassembling one component before disassembling another, but in this case, it was important to get everything that would be Cerakoted sent out in as few batches as possible. Thus, the engine, suspension, and wheel components to be Cerakoted would all be prepped in the same batch.
Chocolate milk, baby!
Not many of these fork components would be reused, but the lowers were in need of some fresh Cerakote, so they came fully apart. The same can be said for these wheels, as BBR offers heavy-duty spoke kits as well as rims that will not bend or crack under heavy impacts like the stock ones might. But the hubs on both wheels were in good shape, so I'd be lacing those new rims and spokes back to the OEM hubs. A bolt cutter makes quick and easy work of spokes that won't be reused. Now, as I began prepping all of these stripped components to be sent out by washing them in the sink and degreasing them, I realized the clutch cover still required some disassembly. I removed each of the final parts from it, popped the oil sight glass out, scraped old gasket material, but still needed to take care of this nasty pitting from rocks and dirt colliding with the engine over the years. I utilized a shaft extension and coarse cleaning wheel, both from Pryme MX, to make quick, easy work of this task. I did not fully strip the cover, but rather only took care of the imperfections and pitting, as the cover would be going in a blast cabinet where all of the paint would be removed. Here is a before and after of just a few minutes with the Pryme wheel. A link to Pryme is down in the description below as well.
We're all prepped, degreased, and ready to box these things up. All of our parts that will be Cerakoted black, all of our parts that will be Cerakoted purple, and then our hardware. This will be blacked out, and this will be classic zinc with a shiny chrome look. Let's get it all boxed up.
And shortly after, I had all of these parts back in my hands looking stunning. Miles at Canaan Lasers did an incredible job Cerakoting these, so if you're in need of Cerakote services, be sure to get in touch with Miles, linked below. I tossed the engine cases into the oven to expand the aluminum to make bearing installation go more smoothly, and then I disassembled the transmission countershaft in order to replace it with a forged shaft from BBR. This shaft is stronger, which is important to consider when you big bore a dirt bike. While the bike may be able to fit a big bore, all of the internal components were not necessarily designed to withstand that much power and force, so this is one of those upgrades that you thank yourself for in the long run. With that shaft assembled, it was time to pull the cases out of the oven and the bearings out of the freezer. Some bearings dropped right in, while others required a little persuasion from my Tusk bearing driver, but all in all, it went smoothly. From here, I installed seals and O-rings and then the crankshaft, once again utilizing my Tusk crank puller. If you can't tell, most of my specialty dirt bike tools are from Tusk, and I bought all of these well before I started working with Rocky Mountain. Most of these I've had for many years now, and they've all worked incredibly well and are available on the Rocky Mountain website. Once the crank was installed, I added some assembly lube to the bearings and then installed the transmission, shift drum, and shift forks. It was then time to add some gasket maker to the sealing surface and bolt the case halves together. And cases bolted together, I found this kickstart retainer still sitting on the workbench. Curious how I overlooked it, as it turns out, factory Kawasaki forgot to cut threads into the holes on these cases. I verified this by comparing the new and old case halves. So I had to resplit the cases before tapping threads into the holes and bolting the halves back together. If there's one thing I've learned building bikes, it's that everything will not always go to plan, so this was just a small hiccup in the process. With the bottom end assembled, that's actually the first 4-stroke bottom end I have ever built, so that's pretty cool. I needed to reinstall the cylinder studs, which have threads on both ends, so the way to install those is using the double nut method. You tighten 2 nuts on each other, which allows you to then use the top nut to tighten the stud into the case. Studs installed, it was finally time for the 143 big bore kit from BBR. This kit includes a cylinder, piston, and that high-performance camshaft that I mentioned earlier. I checked ring end gap and then carefully installed the piston and cylinder with plenty of lubrication while following BBR's instructions for ring orientation. From there, I installed the valves along with new seals and springs. Then came the BBR camshaft and the cylinder head was ready to install. The head nuts along with the rest of the beautiful hardware used to bolt this engine together came from Fast Metric Fasteners, who offer high quality bolt kits for a wide variety of makes and models. I've been using Fast Metric kits on all of my builds for the last 5 years. With the engine nearing completion, I needed to set the engine at top dead center and install the cam sprocket at the correct timing. Kawasaki makes this pretty easy with a timing mark on the flywheel as well as a timing mark on the camshaft sprocket. With that set, I installed the tensioner and then rotated the engine a few cycles to verify correct timing and tension. I set valve clearance, which is super easy with adjustable valves, and then in went a brand new oil filter from Tusk and all of the gorgeous purple Cerakoted engine covers. For a pit bike engine, this thing is damn good looking if I do say so myself. With the engine complete, the highest priority item became the frame. You see, I have a 2022 plastic kit from MXFitCo.com, but this is a 2005 frame. The frame needs some tabs welded onto it, and the plastics need some modifications. These frame mods need to happen before I send the frame to Miles to be Cerakoted purple. After some quick measurements, I chopped the battery box out using my Milwaukee rotary tool. With that fender modified as necessary, I did a test fit, and note I did buy a brand new 2022 fuel tank in order for this to work. Everything fit nicely aside from a few mods we need to make to the frame to actually bolt these plastics up. I headed over to my buddy Ben's shop, who generously offered his help, and we got to work. We began with a little CAD, or cardboard aided design as Ben coined it, in order to design the brackets that we needed to add to the frame for the shrouds to bolt onto. We then matched this cardboard design over a piece of steel and cut those out with the angle grinder. Ben smoothed out the edges of that new bracket using the angle grinder and then tested alignment to ensure we got it right before center punching where the hole would go and drilling that out with the drill press. Ben cut threads into the piece of steel, as this steel is thick enough that we were able to avoid having to weld a nut onto the back of it or anything like that. To finish these brackets off, Ben cleaned up the edges using the belt sander. After grinding the factory paint off of the frame where the tab would be welded, it was time to attach this new bracket to the frame. I got a quick crash course in welding as I was going to try the second bracket. Ben finished up the welds for that first bracket and then grinded it all down so it was smooth.
We got one on, one to go.
Certified welder.
Next up, it was my turn to take what Ben had just taught me and form the second bracket. So if you happen to win this bike, it might be obvious which side Ben handled and which side I handled, but I can say with some level of confidence, it'll be strong enough to hold the shroud plastics on. Now with those two tabs welded on, we had one more task. The The side panel tabs needed to be moved back about half an inch to align properly with the new plastics. And voila! We now have 2022 plastics on a 2005 KLX frame that bolt right up. With everything mounted on the frame, I really wanted to see this mock-up with the new custom seat cover from DeCal Works to make a final decision on what color the frame would be coated. I installed that gorgeous white and purple cover, and seeing it mounted solidified my decision to have the frame coated purple. I removed the body kit and then degreased the frame in preparation for Cerakote. Now there were a few more items to go with this final batch of Cerakote as well. The brand new BBR swing arm, which I removed bearings and other components from, the Mikuni VM26 carb, which will be a phenomenal upgrade for the big bore, ensuring this more powerful engine can get the fuel it needs to perform, and the BBR intake manifold that adapts that larger carb to the stock head. I sent those parts out to Canaan lasers and shifted attention to building the wheel set, which was difficult. I have never laced pit bike wheels, and the order of operations is precise. The front wheel took me quite a few tries to get right. I learned from it, and the rear was a little quicker, but this was not a real fun experience. I trued both wheels in my truing stand before installing some Tusk tires and adding rim locks to both wheels. Pit bikes don't usually come with rim locks, but if you plan to ride them hard and jump them, it is a very wise addition to prevent ripping valve stems and popping tubes. The wheel set came out absolutely stunning, and the more components I finished, the more pleased I was with my decision on the colorway. There were only a couple items left to rebuild at this point, so I moved on to the suspension. The spring on this new DNM rear shock was too long to remove without a spring compressor, so Mikey over at Deja Moto helped me out with that, so I could strip that spring, and I opted for an anodized purple color coat from Duplicolor. Mikey reinstalled the spring for me, and that was it for the shock. As for the forks, they would receive new tinitride stanchions, new BBR heavy-duty springs, BBR extended damping rods, and new seals from Tusk. Suspension complete. Remember that crusty old hardware? I sent it all out to Nick's Vapor Honing Services for zinc plating, and this is how it came back. Absolutely stunning. With every component built and the final batch of Cerakote parts back from Canaan lasers, the purple frame was looking beautiful, and it was time to assemble this KLX143. Now I have to interrupt the assembly for just a minute to show you this beautiful Pro Circuit exhaust provided by Fathead Racing and this unbelievable custom exhaust sticker by DeCal Works that matches the colorway of the bike. Now let's keep it rolling. All of the plastics bolted on exactly as desired after those frame mods, but the front fender still needed some work. The triple clamp design did change from 05 to 22, so I had to align the fender, punch the location of some new holes, and drill it out. I also added 2 bolts as posts to align the front number plate, and with all of this done, it bolted up nicely. Next up, some beautiful custom graphics from DeCal Works, beginning with this foldable Polysport stand that will come with the bike for whoever wins it. I designed this kit using the DeCal Works graphic interface on their website and wanted to keep the colors consistent and clean. If you are interested in a set of custom graphics, DeCal Works actually has the KP, Fender Boys, and Weird People Go Fast logos available directly on their website, which I think is super cool. Graphics installed, the bike was incredibly close to ready to ride. I added oil and fuel and waited for one final batch of parts to arrive to finish the build. Those final parts were simply grips and a chain, as I had ordered ODI lock-ons but did not have the correct cam for the throttle assembly, and the first chain I ordered was too short as I forgot this BBR swing arm is longer and thus requires a longer chain. So after these final items are installed, I'll show you the before and after of the transformation of this pit bike, and then we're taking it on my buddy Kyle's pit bike track to test it out. Now before taking this bike out on the track, Cam at Pryme MX sent me this Kawasaki clutch cover guard to protect that Cerakote from getting scratched up, and not to mention it looks great as well. Now let's freaking rip this thing, and don't forget to get entered for your chance to win.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, baby. Kyle getting his turn. Let's go, Kyle. Yeah, boy. Oh, I can't keep up with him. The big boy's too fast. Felt really good.
If you love me right, this could be the summer of our lives now, honey. Give it to me like you know you should now, baby. This could be the summer of our lives, the summer.
All right, the KLX143 freaking rips. Thanks to Kyle and Beth for letting us bring it out here and rip it at the track. Get yourself entered to win it. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it.